Hey y'all. So we're gonna look at a vote today that is funny and not universally applicable for everyone, unfortunately, but maybe the most universally accepted standard and principle. Exodus 20:14. Again, Exodus chapter 20, verse 14. Do not commit adultery. No why to that statement. It's just a blanket statement. Just don't commit adultery. Like I said, it's interesting that that's unfortunately in the last few years not an universally accepted standard, but maybe the most accepted standard and principle to have. Because, I mean, no one likes to be unfaithful. No one likes to have someone be unfaithful to them. No one likes to have someone cheat on them. But what is interesting in these are the words of Jesus in Matthew 19:8. We actually get a little bit we actually get this a little bit more fleshed out. Maybe we don't see it in Exodus, but we actually get this a little bit more fleshed out in Matthew 19:8. He's, well, actually, let's back up a bit. Matthew 19:7. The Pharisees asked Jesus, the religious leaders of the day asked Jesus, they said to him, why then did Moses command to give a certificate of divorce and put her away? He said to He said to them, this being Jesus, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts. That's an important that's an important note right there. Because of the hardness of your hearts permitted you to divorce your wife. But from the beginning it was not so. So I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except this is very important too. Whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality, unfaithfulness that I talked about, except for sexual immorality, and marries another commits adultery. And whoever marries her with divorce commits adultery. Yes, let's move on down to verse 10 actually. This is an important note from the disciples. Verse 10. His disciples said to him, if such is the case of the man with his wife, which I think that just general language myself, because that seems to be the language of the day back then. The man was put in the forefront of situations, but you can read that in general language if you want to. His disciples said to him, if such is the case of the man with his wife, it is better not to marry. And verse 11 finally, but he said to them, Jesus, all cannot accept same, but only those to whom it has been given. Now it's interesting because we see that I don't know if there's a record of when divorce happened, like when divorces were a thing, like were made into practice, y'all. But we do see a deed that divorce was not divorce was already a thing in some cultures when the Israelites were there. Maybe it was a thing with the Egyptians, I don't know. But we see for important context, it was not a thing with the Israelites up until that point. Up until we actually see in verse 8 that the people asked Moses. The people asked Moses for permission to divorce. And we see a particular trait with the Israelites. We'll see it. We'll see it more, but well, in Exodus indeed we'll see it more. But with a particular trait with the Israelites hiatus here. The Israelites were kind of upset with fitting, and I said upset. I didn't, it sounded like upset I brought, but I said upset. The Israelites were kind of upset with fitting in, with fitting into the culture of the day, fitting into the popular culture of the day, which we would see in falling in Exodus and Matthew and everything to disastrous results. I mean, sometimes for the good because of God's mercy, but most of the time the disastrous results. But we see Jesus takes it even further. And this is interesting to think about too. I don't know if this is exactly, I mean, this isn't exactly how you have to read the verse, but it is interesting that Jesus gives another caveat. Jesus, Jesus says, and I say to you, whoever divorces wife except for sexual immorality marries another commits adultery. A translation that I read, I can't remember exactly what it was. Maybe it was in Mark. I don't remember. But Jesus gives another caveat to that. Jesus says, "Whoever looks at a woman with lust in his eyes has committed adultery with him in his heart." So you can look at that. Like I say, you don't have to read it like that, but it is interesting. It is interesting to think about. You can read it as Jesus giving another ground for divorce there, since he called that adultery. And language, especially coming from Jesus, language isn't just used flippantly like that. But it makes sense too, because if you're married or in a relationship, which it just said do not commit adultery, the commandment says it doesn't specify married or not. But if you're in a relationship, but especially if you're married, your eyes should only be for your partner. So if your eyes fall away from your partner, then if your eyes fall away from your partners, and then that is considered adultery in the eyes of Jesus Christ, which, like I say, makes the oddest sense. But interesting too. This is I mentioned this is I mentioned this is accepted. This is an accepted principle for most people. Don't don't commit don't commit adultery. But Matthew 19:8, and I say or 9, I'm sorry, Matthew 99. And I say to you, again, this is comes from the mouth of Jesus, which all scripture is God inspired, but I just mean that we should take Jesus' word directly more impactful than we do with other people. Because sometimes Jesus contradicts, which isn't really a contradiction, because I mean, everything that he says is perfect. But sometimes Jesus seemingly contradicts other writers in the Gospels because he is the author of the Gospel, he is the authority on the Gospel. So we should take him with more credence than we would the other writers. Jesus said, and I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. And whoever marries her who would divorce commits adultery. Now, the second part of that verse is controversial, but it's nothing compared to the first. Because Matthew 19:9 makes it clear. And these are the words of Jesus. These aren't my words. So if you have a problem with it, take it up with Jesus. Don't take it up with me. But and that's a sound that's a sound strategy for anyone. Whoever has a problem with the gospel, they don't have a problem with you specifically. They have a problem with Jesus. And Jesus is much more obviously Jesus is much more powerful than they are. You're just relaying the words of the gospel to them. So don't take it personally when people get mad at you, because the gospel said you will be hated. Jesus himself said you will be hated for a namesake. Anyway, what's controversial I can say? Matthew 19:9, and I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her with divorce commits adultery. Now, in a perfect world, a marriage would all work out. Specifically, a Christian marriage. In a perfect world, it would all work out. Because further on, we have standards for marriage. We have standards for the husband and standards for the wife. And if they did follow that, then they should all work out. But unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. We did, but we live in a fallen world. But still, even in a fallen world, Jesus said, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. Now, it is interesting the language used for divorce because, I mean, separation isn't the same as divorce. Getting yourself out of the bad situation isn't the same as divorce. Defending yourself isn't the same as divorce. Doing what's best for yourself isn't the same as divorce. Why is it taken so seriously? Is when you're married, at least from a Christian perspective, because we can't, unfortunately, we cannot expect the secular universe and the secular world to uphold Christ standards. But when you're married, from a Christian perspective, you're entered into a covenant with God. And God doesn't take any covenant with humanity. I mean, we see even as far back as Abraham, which would still have been, far back even here, even in Exodus. We see even as far back in Abraham, God was faithful with his covenant, even if Abraham had to wait a while for it. Even if Abraham didn't necessarily see the fruits of his labor, we see God never forgot his covenant. It's the same with the marriage covenant. It's the same with any covenant that God hands down. God doesn't take any covenant with him yet. He does give leeway because someone else broke the covenant. So it is ground it is grounds of divorce because someone else broke the covenant, being sexual immoral and being, which even then that's very specific grounds for breaking a covenant with sexual immorality. Because sex is, regardless of forgetting everything you know that the law says about it, sex is the most, I don't mean it to be a pun, but it's gonna sound like one. Sex is the most intimate thing that you can do. You're giving yourself to your partner, you're giving yourself wholeheartedly to another person. God created sex for the but he also created sex for the pleasure of man and just carnal desires and everything, which I don't have any experience myself, obviously, but but yeah, that is something I've thought about and something that does pop into my head. Just the standard that God set for marriage and the standard that God set for His people. Also, I want to adultery thing with verse verse 2 and verse 1, which don't which says don't worship other gods, don't bow down to other gods, because God Himself is jealous. I talked to a friend this past Sunday, and he was upset. That's one of the first things he said to me. Not necessarily that he was upset, but he just said to me that, man, this world is just going to hell in a handbasket. Basically, I don't know what to do. I just get discouraged, basically. And I encouraged him. I said, yeah, that's not why I'm saying this. But honestly, thinking about it, we're all that cry, we're all that cry that's given that's missing too. We're the end of defense as Christians. We're not literally the anti. We may be, but we're metaphysically the anti of defense as Christians, to tell people the truth and to tell people how to live, not because of ourselves, but on behalf of Jesus. And on account that He wants you to have life and He wants you to have it more abundantly. Could mean eternal life, but also meaning He wants you to live lives forward while you are here. And even lives forward by His standards means living for Him. So if we commit adultery specifically on Him, if we worship other gods or bow down to other gods, the same as adultery in marriage, we find ourselves empty. We're searching for something that can never be filled outside of the will of Jesus Christ because we have broken the covenant. We have broken the covenant between the wife and ourselves. We have broken the covenant between God and ourselves. The wife has broken the covenant between God and herself. The wife has broken the covenant between us. So when we see that this is put for a very specific reason. Because when we break the covenant between us, then we will ultimately just be searching and searching and will never be filled. Guys, that can be hard to do. I'm not saying it's not. Not committing adultery, especially when you're outside of God, can be very hard to do, being vigilant. I mean, we see this even with King David. I mean, seeing the naked Bathsheba on a roof. And by the way, don't be aimed Bathsheba for that. That just how Beth was set up back then. We see that because David was in a position that he was not supposed to be in, he was supposed to be with his men, that sexual immorality and adultery, and he'd already had a couple wives at this point. But that's besides the point. We see that the grips of sexual immorality and adultery entrapped him, and because of that, two people, indeed two people that we know of, Yasayite, Uriah, and the firstborn son, David's David's son with Bathsheba. So adultery had far-reaching consequences besides it yourself. So that's important to note. It's important to note that we being God, we seek His standards. I mean, that's why. I mean, on the hopeful side, that's why God gave us a standard. That's why God gave us instruction, and God gave us men, love your wives as Christ loved the church, which we know Christ died for the church. And women, submit yourselves to your husband. Men be the eater, and women, wives, they're correct eater, they're God eater. You act follow them. But if they break the covenant, if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, I mean, there's no harm getting out of that and getting separated and defending yourself and anything. That's what a lot of people will get hung up on. A lot of people get hung up on this, and well, I say a lot of people, but a lot of secular people get hung up on it and said, well, what about abuse? What about this? What about that? Well, first of all, the Bible makes it clear only divorce in the act of sexual morality. But it doesn't encourage defending yourself force, and if your partner not even up to it. I use partner very deliberately because this is, I mean, this affects both genders. Maybe not, statistically in the same way, but both, but that can happen with both abuse and stuff and ground to defend yourself and separate and everything. But God, seek for God in the relationship and the marriage, and he'll just tug with they'll because he gave certain standards and certain expectations that we should with a strive towards we can meet if we submit ourselves to Him first and foremost. Guys, I love you. God bless you. I'll be praying for you, and I'll see you next week. Well, hopefully this works. There we go. Sorry about that.